Hi, everybody. Yes, be sure to hydrate. It's so hot today. Oh my goodness. And I know you're calling in from all over, probably New Mexico and Arizona. My name is Adrienne Smith. I'm with the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition, and I think we have a terrific program. These are the kinds of things that I think we all wait for and look for and watch for, is self-care for the caregiver. How do you take care of yourself? So, and I love watching all your comments in the chat box. Thank you very much. Just a little before we get started, the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition is a statewide organization, and we advocate for frontline healthcare workers of all types, sizes, colors, shapes, sizes, all of that. In other words, what I mean by that is we like to say that we are a large tent and everybody belongs, and that no one ever need be turned away. You can be a family caregiver, you can be a paid professional caregiver. We have plenty of care recipients who support the work that we do. We have plenty of state agency officials, federal officials, foundation funders, and so on. We are an organization that's been around since 2009, and our focus mostly is on education of caregivers, education and training and mixers and some curriculum development. And our lead guest with you today, Pam Stafford, is going to talk to you about not only self-care, but what her organization does. Before we get into that, I want to just point you to a language interpretation. If you haven't been on a lot of webinars like that, language interpretation, this is going to be in Spanish. It can be translated into Spanish. So any of you that choose to do that, I'm going to let Denise, our interpreter, describe how to use the globe and the interpretation function on the bottom of your screen. Denise.
To access language interpretation, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation and select your preferred language, English or Spanish. On your phone, tap your screen to activate the buttons at the bottom of your screen, select the circle with the 3 dots, then select interpretation and your language. You can select mute audio if you would like to only hear the interpreter. Please remember to speak in the language you selected. Hay interpretación disponible. Para acceder a la interpretación al español, seleccione el icono del globo al fondo de la pantalla. De la lista que sale, seleccione su idioma preferido, inglés o español. Si está en su teléfono, toque su pantalla para activar los botones al fondo de su pantalla. Seleccione los 3 puntos, luego seleccione interpretación y su idioma. Puede seleccionar el botón de Mute Audio si desea escuchar solamente a la intérprete. Favor de hablar solamente en el idioma que ha seleccionado. Thank you.
So I'm pressing the start for you to be able to choose that now. So you may choose English or Spanish for the rest of the time of this webinar. And what I'd like to do now is ask Dana Howarth, the program director, to share a little bit with you about Zoom etiquette, using the Q&A, using the chat, and tell you a little bit about herself as well and what she does.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I hope everyone's having a great Wednesday afternoon. So a little about myself. I've been with the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition for 6 years now. And I always love being part of these trainings and learning from caregivers and learning about new topics. Just some of the Zoom etiquette. We are using the webinar format. So if you're not already familiar with the webinar format, it's slightly different than Zoom meetings. So we ask that if you have a question during the presentation, at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button, and you can submit questions to the presenters using that function. We ask that you only use it for specific questions. Like if it's an actual question about the topic matter of today's training. If you have any questions about Zoom or any issues you're having regarding Zoom, you can send those to the panelists in the chat using the chat function. That way we can see those and kind of distinguish the difference between questions regarding Zoom and issues with technology versus questions about the content matter. We ask though that if you use the Q&A, keep it to questions. If you have any additional like outside commentary regarding your question, you can always send that to us in the chat. Sometimes it gets confusing when there's bunch of non-questions showing up on our Q&A. But if any questions come up during this presentation, I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So thank you.
Thank you, Dana. So now to get right to the program and the rest of our program, we have two very special guests for you today. I'll introduce Pam Stafford first, and I'll introduce her the way that I did last week for those of you who maybe I don't know. I'll tell you, I was in a meeting once, and before Pam came into the room, I was talking to a coworker of hers when she was at the ARC, New Mexico. And that coworker said, and I was just meeting her for the first time. And this coworker said, when I grow up, I want to be just like Pam Stafford. Now that woman was already 30 or 35 years old, but that told me a lot about the kind of person that person was, because I already knew for myself in the maybe 10 years that I've known Pam, maybe a little bit longer than that, the kind of person that she is. She's smart. She keeps her word on everything that she says she's going to do. You can just bank on it. The other person with Pam today is Valerie Sosi, who I think we've been working together for 4, maybe 5 years. And Valerie is an independent, strong, tough, funny, always makes me smile person. She always is going above and beyond to reach people, going above and beyond in doing whatever it is she's doing, which you can see from her background. She's now started her own foundation, and yet at the same time, she continues to work with us. So congratulations for both of you. And I think this is kind of the first time that I know of that you've both been together on a program of ours. So the program is all yours from here on.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have Valerie here. And I'm very happy that so many people have decided to attend. That tells me that there's some need and also some interest in promoting self-care for the caregiver. And I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And I want people to know that my expertise on this subject is very much through learning. It's through not providing myself self-care in my lifetime when I've been in a caregiving position, and knowing what happened when I wasn't providing self-care, that I became not a pleasant person to be around, that I made bad decisions, and that I didn't really always like myself or what I was doing. But I thought I was bulletproof. I thought I could work 18 hours and go to school full time and take care of family members and solve all the world's problems. And it turns out that I'm not Superwoman. And so that is why the first thing we're going to talk about today is giving yourself permission to care for yourself. And we're going to talk about some tips for caring for the caregiver. We're going to have the section by Valerie on self-confidence, and then we'll do a wrap up and we'll talk through some things going on in the next few weeks. So giving yourself permission to care for yourself. There's a lot of reasons why we become caregivers. And that's the reason I asked you to put that into the chat. And I think that it looks like people answered the way I anticipated that they might answer. I did separate this into family caregivers, paid or unpaid, and professional caregivers, people who make a choice that this is going to be their career. With family caregivers, and I saw this in the chat almost immediately, you do it for. But with love, love is a powerful emotion, and it's a powerful emotion for good, but there's a lot of other things and other emotions that can be part of that love. You sometimes want to give care that you received, right? Sometimes people become family caregivers because of bad experiences with other care settings. And so I hear this often from siblings who've had their brother or sister possibly live in a group home that didn't turn out the way they wanted it to turn out. And so now they've become a family caregiver for that reason. Sometimes it's circumstances. Last week, if you were here, we talked quite a bit about the DD waiver wait list. And so there may just not be any option, but for a family member to be a caregiver, or there may not be resources. You may live in an area of the state where there just are not home health aides that are going to be available to come in as often as you would like. The second is professional caregivers become professional caregivers because they have the desire to help others. That's the primary reason why we do it. But also that there are personal relationships with others that affect you in a positive way and that are rewarding to you in some way. I watched a video yesterday from NDWA on essential care, and the care recipient was 101 years old. And the person who was the caregiver had been her caregiver, a non-family member, for 30 years. Now that's a long, meaningful relationship. Sometimes professional caregivers do it because of their work schedule. They can be a little more flexible. Sometimes they're suited to the work. That's why many people select the job that they do, is because they're suited to the work. Sometimes it's circumstances. It's the job that maybe was available when you were looking, or you knew someone, or it's resources. So that's why people become caregivers. Here are some realities of being a caregiver. And the Caregiver Coalition did they were part of a Senate joint memorial a couple of years ago, 2017, 2018, that went around the state listening to what people said about the reality of being a caregiver. And professional caregivers said that they often work more than one job just to make ends meet. So they're already working more than the 40 hours that you would expect to work in a job. Professional caregivers often also have caregiving responsibilities during their non-paid hours with their own family. So it's not a job that ends if you're going home to a parent or a sibling that you're taking care, or a spouse that you're taking care of. Family caregivers sometimes have non-caregiving paid jobs. So they may work 40 hours and still have caregiving responsibilities on top of that. Family caregivers often care for multiple people or multiple generations. So you may be a caregiver who is taking care of a grandparent, taking care of a parent, taking care of your own children, taking care of a spouse or a sibling. And each one has its own unique challenges and a lot of juggling involved. The other thing that's the reality is that when you are a caregiver of a family member, that changes the relationship with the family member. And the most common way is to think that if, my parents took care of me and now I'm taking care of my parents. That's the most common one. But if you're a sibling of someone and you're providing support for them and it's under, say, the DD waiver, now there are other people expecting you to abide by certain rules. It can change the relationship with the sibling that you're working with. It can also change the relationship with family members who are not care recipients. And so you might have several siblings who are all taking care of your parents, And suddenly that's a different relationship than being siblings. Or you may have siblings that, if you're the primary caregiver, have concerns about the way things are happening with your mom or dad. And so there's a lot of stress associated with being a caregiver. And I liked this graphic because it just kind of reminds me of that the clouds are thoughts that float through your brain. And they're floating through, and as one leaves on the right-hand side, here comes another one on the left-hand side. And these are thoughts that both make you, that provide you stress, but that also makes you worry about taking a break for yourself. And so some of those thoughts may be, why do I need a break from someone I love? The fear that something will happen while you're gone, not wanting someone else to take care of someone that you love, that it's your responsibility. And yet you may feel that if you're taking care of dad, that you're not there with your kids. You may wonder if you're doing enough. You may be disturbed because you don't think other family members are doing enough. You could be spending a lot of time with someone and still missing them and the relationship that you used to have. You may be thinking that your mother was always there for you, and now you may have to go somewhere else. You may wonder what happens if you make a mistake, and then there's always some fatigue and tiredness. And I think we're going to have time for questions at the end. So if there's something immediate, you need to type in the chat, but otherwise keep your hand raised and we'll come to you as we talk through. So I want to talk about some impact of caregiver fatigue. When you are tired or overstressed, emotion regulation becomes harder. And the way that impacts the care recipient is that they may become more emotional or nervous once they realize that you're more emotional on any given day. You can't avoid fatigue forever without creating some health issues for yourself. And so the care recipient might become worried about you. The fact that you're, saying your back hurts, or that you're feeling run down, or if you're taking time off, they might miss you. For professional caregivers, there's always the fear of turnover, and not having consistent care is the number one thing that I hear from care recipients about the challenge they have about professional caregivers. Sometimes if you're worried about all the other people you're taking care of, you're never present in the morning, in the moment. And the care recipient might feel like they're a bother, or you don't want to be there. Even though it's exactly the place you want to be, you might still feel like you're not really able to concentrate in the moment. And when you are fatigued, it is easier to make mistakes. And those mistakes may have an impact on the care recipient. So the most important thing you can do is not to forget to give yourself that generous love that you so freely extend to others. And it's hard, I know from experience, but you have to take care of yourself, or you're never going to be able to give the best of yourself to the people that you care for. The fact that so many people are here gives me hope that you've already taken some self-care, and that you're here with the idea that you want to learn more about providing self-care. So we're going to move on to the next section, tips for self-care for the caregiver. And you might want to type into the chat what you do for you, because we all have our own experiences and our own knowledge and our own expertise. So type something that you do for yourself in the chat so that other people can learn from your experience. But we're going to talk about tips for every day. And the first three we all know. Prioritize sleep. Sleep, sleep, sleep. Do not sacrifice sleep. Prioritize hydration, as Adrian said earlier. Not having enough water, not hydrating yourself can be very bad for you. Exercise on a regular basis. And I think we all know already the benefits of exercising. So I wasn't going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But I have some great stories about how people combine either their need for social time or their need to be alone with exercise. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Pet love. All the science says if you spend 10 minutes petting a cat or a dog, your blood pressure goes down. You just feel yourself relaxed. It's also something to take care of, though. So you have to balance that. Then the last two things I want to talk about. I know that when you go to a self-care training or seminar, oftentimes people say, well, what you need to do is carve out an hour or two a week. And we just went through, but wait a minute, I work 2 jobs and I have other care responsibilities. And how do I do that exactly? And it can just be stressful thinking about it. How do I add time for myself? So we're going to talk about self-care to what you already are spending time doing. And we're going to talk about adding a few minutes to what you already love most about your routine. And then I'm still going to ask you to carve time out for yourself. But at least there will be a little bit of information about if you really can't carve time out, what you can do for yourself that may not be so problematic. So exercising. We all know the reason why we need to exercise. What we need to know, though, is that everybody, every human has a need for both social interaction and alone time. And it varies. You can be a person who far prefers social interaction and you need very little alone time, or you can be a person who's kind of an introvert. Either way, you need both at some point in your life. And so some people have given me some great stories about combining the two. And so I want to share those. I worked with someone who was a professional caregiver, came into the field of the DD waiver because he had a sibling. And what happened to him over time was his parents aged, and so they needed care. And then his sibling, who they had been taking care of, still needed care. And so suddenly his family caregiving needs were also very, very strong for him. There was a great need. And he was a very social person. He was extroverted, but he started to avoid family functions. He started not to go out with his work friends because he felt like everything was about the people in his life who needed care. And it was just a little bit too much. So what he finally did is he joined a gym clear across town so he wouldn't run into any family members. And he started taking classes a couple of times a week. But when he was taking these classes, it wasn't with people he knew. So he got social interaction and he got to make some new friends, acquaintances, but he could talk about things that were not necessarily about caregiving and wasn't adding the stress around, his siblings always wanted to talk about mom and dad or his brother, and his work friends always wanted to talk about work. On the other hand, for some people that wouldn't work. And so I have another friend who, as her parents were getting older, her parents were determined they were going to stay in their own homes and that they were not letting strangers into their house. And so the siblings started taking turns. They would go over mid-afternoon, they would spend the night, they would make sure breakfast was there the next morning, that a lunch was prepared, and they would leave and another sibling would come a few hours later. What happened though is at the time when you most need your sibling support, the siblings were only talking about mom and dad. They were only talking about who's going to buy the groceries. You have to pick this up from the pharmacy. And what they decided to do is just pick a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. when they were not with their parents, and they would all go on a walk. And so every Saturday they would go on a walk, and they would not allow themselves to talk about their parents. They could only talk about each other. And that way they were able to regain that sibling connection. For some people, it's really about alone time when they exercise, that they're trying to fulfill both needs. So another friend of mine is an attorney who lives at home and works at home, actually, and loves working at home. But during the pandemic, her husband was also working from home. And both of her grown daughters moved in with her, one because of a healthcare crisis, and now she's a family caregiver, and it drove her crazy that she never had alone time. So she started going for walks, and people would say, oh, we'll go with you, we'll go with you. And that's not what she wanted. So she started listening to podcasts so that she would say, oh, it's really important I listen to this. But it was not. It was an entertainment podcast she was listening to, but it allowed her an hour a day to be alone. And she was used to 8 hours a day of being alone. So sometimes you combining both works. Walking with your pet sometimes works, or just going to a gym to swim during busy hours, during non-busy hours when there's nobody there. I'm not going to go swimming at 10 p.m. at night, but for some people, that is the time that it allows them that alone time. Now I wanted to talk about additions to your normal routine. There are things that we all have to do, right? We all have to prepare meals. We all have to eat. Maybe there's other people we're preparing meals with. Can you add self-care by doing things around mealtime, such as preparing meals with your kids and including them, so you feel like you have that time with your kids? We all have to shower and brush our teeth and get dressed and do things in the morning or in the evening. So if you are feeling like you're especially stressed or especially tired, it's nice if you keep a fragrance for yourself, or your favorite robe, or your favorite sleeping t-shirt. Don't wear it all the time. Use it only when you feel like it's something that you need some self-care for. If you're grocery shopping or going banking, doing all those things we have to do, park further away to walk. And then think about adding time to what you love. And so if you really love cooking, but you're doing it fast because you don't have a lot of time, can you add some time to cooking? And here's one of the best stories that I can tell you is a friend of mine whose mother was getting older, and she was caregiving for her, and her mother didn't remember much. But when she would say, do you remember that soup you used to make? Or do you remember tortillas? Her mother knew the recipe and all the hints and everything else. That was within her mother's memory. And so she would tell her daughter all these great recipes. And then once a week, her daughter would take the time to make one of those recipes. And that was a beautiful way, I thought, for her to really honor both the relationship she now had with her mother and the relationship of growing up with her mother, and to do something that she loved to do. If your alone time is your bath time, and I hear this all the time from people, that they get 15 minutes that they're alone after everyone else is asleep, or first thing in the morning, they wake up early and that's their only time alone. Can you add once a week? Can you add 10 minutes and do some journaling or some reading or something that feels like it's a little more your time, especially because your family and care recipients might already be used to the fact that you have that time already set aside. Now, I told you I was still going to say schedule time for self-care. Schedule some time each week that is a set aside for you. It can be 20 minutes in the morning before anybody gets up that you are that you are sitting outside listening to the birds in the morning. It can be an hour a week reading a book, but schedule some time for you and really prioritize that time. Schedule some time each month to do something that feels out of the routine, but is self-care. Perhaps that is a manicure that you go get once a month. Remember when you are on a vacation with your family, oftentimes people are still caregiving while they're on vacation. So think about remembering to schedule some time for you. Doesn't have to be a solitary activity when I say for you. It can be with your spouse or a child or a friend, but something that feels like it's self-care. And think about in the last 3 months, have you taken a day that felt like self-care for yourself? Self-care is self-love, so we need to be aware of changes in our pattern, and things that we were doing for self-care may become self-destructive. And so we need to be aware of that. Alcohol use dehydrates us. It doesn't help us to sleep. It makes us more tired. We all need alone time, but that can become isolation. We all need social time, but maybe we're avoiding alone time. I'd love me some retail therapy, but if I'm stressing out over not having enough money, then I've kind of blown my self-care. As you're walking and exercising and trying to take care of yourself, don't think of it as trying to fix yourself. And Valerie's going to talk about self-doubts and confidence, but don't get into this idea that that you have to fix yourself, because you don't. And then too much binging or social media can also be problematic. Time to reflect is really important. The Shakespeare line, "To thine own self be true." No matter what self-care you are practicing, only you know if it's working. Only you know what you need. And giving yourself, remember that the purpose of self-care is so you're able to give yourself both the best of you and what is best for you, so that you can give your care recipients what's best of you as well, and to bring the best of you. So really think through if it's something that is working. And self-care might change in different circumstances. In the pandemic, I knew people, including myself, music and reading is what I do, but I wasn't able to listen to music for the first few months. I wasn't able to read the type of literature I normally read. And that's okay. If it stops being self-care, it's okay to stop and find something else. I think because the time, I have some concerns about making sure that we have time for Valerie. I'm gonna kind of skip through the stressful event. But I want to make sure and give you these resources. This is the state of New Mexico Caregiver support line that you can call if you're having any concerns. And then the HTTPS Care Together chat is a website that allows you to text and to have a chat with someone. And it's a national website. And I'm going to move it on now to Valerie. And I'll forward her slides.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm glad you guys all made it, and you guys want to learn a little bit more about self-care, and hope you guys are taking this all in. It looks like it on the chat. I know that a lot of you are the sole caregiver, so it can get very, very stressful. So some of the things in self-care, though, is like self-confidence, because I know that even though you are taking care of them, you might have that somebody kind of horns in sometimes, maybe, you know, brother, sister, another family member, and but you're the primary person, you know, for that person, and maybe they want to help, and just kind of giving them that boundary too. Boundaries are important for self-care, because you don't want somebody running all over you as well. Because a lot of times, and I know my caregivers have the biggest heart. You guys just want to help. You guys want to do a lot, and you go above and beyond for your loved one. So what is self-confidence? Self-confidence is a feeling of trust in one's abilities, quality, and judgment. So you guys are having training like this, you've had first aid, maybe you're changing somebody's wound, whatever you're doing in the house, you know what to do. That's part of the confidence. Like maybe you already have a routine set up when you go right in, and you're like, okay, I'm getting ABC done, and you feel like, I got this, okay, let me do it. That's what self-confidence is, knowing that you have that, I guess, that attitude of, I got this, I know what to do. And why do you need that? Because it allows you to do what you need. You have less anxiety and less fear. But if it's maybe something new for like, let's say like an IV, if you had to do an IV, right? So you would put in that needle, and maybe you did if you did the class on this, you probably do it a couple of times, and maybe you didn't do it for very long, and now you're coming back to it. So if you don't feel confident, how do you think that your person is going to feel? If it's your loved one or your client, they're going to like, I don't want, you're shaking over there, I don't want you to touch me, you know. So you had to have that confidence, know you can do it, and you have that, you can feel it too. A lot of us can feel it, right? I can't even see your faces, so I can't see the heads nodding. But I know that you can feel that. So if somebody, especially like if you're at the hospital, the nurse or anything like that, you know, if they're not doing, how do you feel? And think about that as well to whoever you're caring for, that you want to make them feel like, hey, I got this. So that's why it's important to have that for yourself. So when you're taking care of your loved one, oh, next slide. Confident behavior and low confidence. Like, how can you tell? So if you have confidence, like again, even when others say no. So that's kind of one thing too. Like I said, when somebody kind of horns in on your in your domain and says, not like that, and you're just kind of like, whoa, you know, like, I know what I'm doing. I've been here, I've been taking care of so and so, you know, for so long. And I know sometimes you guys get into these things, but when you have that confidence, somebody won't be easily to jump in there, you know. They can feel that from you, and that you can go ahead and go forward and do what you need to do. If you have low confidence, your behavior is going to be, you're just going to kind of go along with what everybody says. If that person comes in, you know, so just be aware of those. And these are just to let you know if maybe you need to boost your confidence in some areas. And then you're being willing to take a risk or go the extra mile to achieve better things. This is why I know you guys have confidence, because you guys are always going above and beyond. If your time is over 1 hour, 2 hours, you guys are there sometimes, you know, 4 hours, 6 hours. You take the time to kind of check on that person, you know, an hour later or something, or you're like, oh, it's on my way to wherever I'm going, I'll go check on them. That's confident behavior, that you just want to, you're taking a little bit of risk and you're going that extra mile to help that person. But if you weren't, you would stay in your comfort zone. You kind of be like, ah, that's okay. Or, you know, you guys just have that big heart of, you know, you don't want to avoid the risk. You're like, oh, shoot, did I do this already? Let me make sure. Even before you guys are leaving work. And, you know, I know you guys are like, okay, going over with them a little bit, debriefing them. Hey, do you have this? You know, so that's kind of, again, those behaviors. So a confident behavior is admitting to your mistakes and learning from them. If something had gone wrong in the house, you know, maybe you were cleaning and something fell apart. I know that happens sometimes. It's like a Tupperware set, you know, like it's just ridiculous sometimes how these things are. You're working hard to cover, if you're trying to work hard to cover up mistake or hoping that you can fix the problem before anybody notices, that's, you know, not really a good thing to do. A lot of the times is just admitting what you had done, make that person aware and saying, hey, I'm sorry, this is what happened. Or maybe if you were just going by and you brushed on something and that whatever it is falls, you know, you can just kind of say that and not worry about having that nervousness of like, oh, they're going to say this or they're going to say that. It's always really good to address the issue first. And then waiting for others to congratulate you on your accomplishments. I have never seen that with my caregivers. That this is where some of these confidence behaviors you guys have already have. Every time I congratulate you guys, I think the one thing that you guys need to do is you need to say thank you, and then zip it. That's it, because you are doing an amazing job. You are doing everything that you can, and take that compliment. You did something good. And if you start saying, oh, thank you, it was nothing, it was, and you're trying to brush it off, that's not a good confidence builder, because when the person's trying to compliment you, you just want to take that gift. And when you say like, oh, it was nothing, I was already here, I was doing, make sure you zip that, because we want to give that gift to you. So what do they say when they give you gifts? Are you supposed to give it back or throw it to the side or brush it to the side? No. So just remember that. Take those compliments and just, you know, we want to be thankful to say thank you for all of the work that you guys do. Next slide. We have a self-confidence again. So you can see this in your body language. I was talking about earlier about how you feel. So let's say like today or any other day, you're just feeling down, something happened. Maybe it's just, you know, I know when it's cloudy outside, we feel like, you know, you feel kind of like bummed out and you're like, I'll still do it, but I don't really feel that great. If you want to have a confidence booster to help you, so that top line there is how, these are your power moves. And the bottom ones are when you're not feeling so well and you're feeling maybe a little bit defeated. So if you guys can tell the difference, right, from the top one and the bottom, if anybody wants to put it in the chat, let me know. But look at how they're sitting. So there's a couple where they're sitting and there's a couple where they're standing. And the one guy there that's really wrapped up, I mean, even his legs are wrapped. So his arms are up, his legs are wrapped, and he's kind of like to the side. If somebody's standing there like that in front of you, you're gonna know that there's something wrong. They're probably like anxious, you know, something like that. And then look at the guy that's sitting in the chair, taking up space. So when you don't want to be seen and you don't want to, you know, again, you're in that space where you're like, oh, I just don't want to deal with this. You want to shrink. So look at all those pictures on the bottom. They're like shrunken. They're even the girl in the chair, she's like hunching over the desk. So you want to shrink. But if you're feeling good and you're feeling out there, you're going to put an easy one. If you can sit down or stand up, you interlace your fingers and you put that right behind your head. Even if you're sitting there right now, anytime that you need a little bit of, I guess you could say power, this stance actually improves your testosterone in your body, which is what we need. And it improves, there's so many different benefits. If you did this for 2 minutes, I believe, 2 or more minutes, you will instantly feel more confident. It's just in the stance. See, when we're like this, look at how much space I'm taking up. And you're sitting up, so you can't be hunched and like this. It probably won't work because you're trying to be hunched over like this. Stand up straight, your head tall. You put this right here, and you're just gonna take up that space. Now, if I'm like this, look how much space I'm taking. Not very much, right? And then you have your Superman stance. Same thing. You're gonna put your hands on your hips, and just like Superman, you're gonna go ahead and have your picture or your feet width part, your hips part, and your hands on your hips, and you're just going to stand there and do your Wonder Woman pose, your Superman pose, and that will give you some of that courage, I guess you could say, as well, to your body. So there's a scientific method to this. So if ever again you need a little oomph, and that's how it can kind of get into your mindset. So if you're standing like this, are you ready to take on the world? Or are you ready to take on the world like this and standing kind of like that guy, right? This is not, you're not ready. So even if you're not, you're gonna stand like that, and you're gonna start getting some of that feel good hormones in your body. Next slide. Again, this is kind of where fake it till you make it. And then for my dinner people, this is the same thing. You have to, whenever you're making a plan, right? So when you're coming in, you're gonna have to think it. Again, think about what you're doing. How do you want to approach something? Maybe especially something that you're, again, new at. So we'll talk about like the IV, right? Something with an IV and a needle. If you're thinking negative, it's most likely going to go the negative way of it. But if you're putting it in a positive mindset where you did the training, you know what to do. You've done it a couple of times, so you've got it. So as long as you're putting that in yourself, let those negative thinking go and keep that positive thought. I can do this. It doesn't take very long. Let me just get it, even that, let me just get it over with. That's even a good type of mindset. Okay, let's just get this done. And then you're going to self-talk. Again, I can do this. You say it out loud before you were thinking it. Okay, what do I need to get? Where do I need to go? I want to finish this. And then you can say, all right, I got this. I have everything here. Let me get this done. I know what I'm doing. And you kind of get this, again, that confidence of, yes, I know I can do this. And you do, you just need that little push. So even before you're doing this, you can do your stance there and get some of that extra push that you need. And again, thinking about who is counting on you. So if you're procrastinating and you're standing there kind of like, oh, I can push it in an hour. Is that really good for your person? Probably not. So you know that somebody's counting on you, and you can build up that confidence for yourself to get it done. And then another good thing to do is have that vision. See yourself finishing it. You feel accomplished, like if you've done it before, or even if you didn't, how would it feel if you accomplished it, you finished it, and you don't have to worry about it now we're moving on. So that's your vision. You're using your mind and envisioning that so that you can get through, whatever hard, maybe a hard situation that you have. This will work with pretty much everything. So maybe you have a tough conversation that you need to do. Again, you're going to think about it and put yourself in that mindset. Why am I talking to this person? What do I need to say to them? And you kind of do this rehearsal, right? And then you have that self-talk. I got this. This is important. I need take it to them, and then envision how things will change after you talk about, this hard situation. So those are just some of the tips that we can give you to try to get through some of the hard times. Next.
Thank you.
And I'm done.
So I just wanted to wrap up and then hopefully have some time for questions. I wanted to let you know that I'm presenting at the ARC New Mexico conference next week. It is a free conference. You can register on their website. We're going to be talking about New Mexico Caregivers in Action. We do have our June membership meeting of Caregivers in Actions for members on June 28th. And you can go to that website to become a member. And then on June 30th, back with the Caregivers Coalition for re-entering the job market at the same time. So I know that we had some hands up. I'm not sure that I can see those. Can you?
It turns out that we were in touch with them by chat and they were all mistakes.
Oh,
But
okay.
if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A for either Valerie or Pam. You can also use the raise your hand function and we can just take you off of mute. Maybe that means some people have gone for a walk, gone off to a yoga class, started the bath water, hopefully. Agnes Gonzalez is the conference online, the ARC conference. Pam, could you talk about that?
Yes, it's actually 3 Wednesdays in a row. So next Wednesday is the last Wednesday, and it has all been virtual, but it's not too late to register.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that conference? What is the ARC New Mexico conference?
Sure. So the ARC New Mexico is an advocacy agency with emphasis on providing support to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the conference is moving forward together. It's co-sponsored by DDC, which you may know as DDPC, the Developmental Disabilities Council. They draw planning from their name. So there's a lot of different kind of presentations going on today. If, for instance, was all unemployment for people with developmental disabilities. Next week, I think it's really focused on kind of a variety of topics around moving forward, getting past the pandemic, lessons learned from the pandemic. What I will be talking about is the work that the coalition did on developing the voice of a caregiver, what the challenges were before COVID, during COVID, now post-COVID, what we're looking forward to making different or having different, and what the Caregivers in Action program, what we will specifically be doing in terms of being a membership agency, what the benefits of being a member would be, and how you can get involved in advocating and making some changes for better work environments and for there's so much going on right now. There is, for instance, the Social Security Rewrite Act, which is being presented before Congress this week. And that act would change both the amount that Social Security recipients receive. It would change the amount that you can earn without having benefits removed. There's also the thought that they might be able to, for a family caregiver who's unpaid and had to quit work, that they might be able to add up to 5 years of pay into Social Security, so that when they retire, they would have some money. And so that's some of the exciting things really happening in Congress right now, that we want some advocacy. We want members to help us advocate for some of this.
I also heard that they were trying to get some tax waivers for family caregivers as well to help out with how that. So that's one of them.
That's one of the things. It's a different act, but that's one of the things. There's also the community-based, the Home and Community-Based Supports Act, which would eliminate wait lists for those who are waiting for services. A mandate that no state could have a wait list. Money would come in, more money would come into the state. And if a person with developmental disabilities moved from one state to another, their services and supports would be able to go with them to the different states.
So that's like what you're talking about with the DD waiver, right? A little
Mhm.
bit about that. Yeah.
That would be huge. In New Mexico, there's more people on the wait list than there are receiving services. So that would be, that would change the entire landscape of caregiving.
So Dana put in the chat box for you Pam Stafford's email address, Valerie Sosi's email address, and her own, Dana at NMDCC. Dana, could you talk a little bit about is there a certificate coming for those who need or want one from this presentation?
Yes, so anyone that attended last week's and this week's will receive certificates for each session. We have one more session in this series next Wednesday, and then after next Wednesday, I will be mailing out the set of certificates for all 3 of them.
2 Wednesdays from now.
Sorry, you're correct. It's the 30th, not next week, following week. It'll just be easier for me to send them all at once to know who, especially if someone attended all 3 of them. But they'll go out at the end of the month. My mistake, that's right. The last session in this series is the 30th of this month.
Thank you, Dana. And for those of you, maybe Pam, right before we conclude here, could you give your pitch for Caregivers in Action? If people haven't met you before or seen you before, they can email you, but what do you do? What does that agency do?
So Caregivers in Action promotes better work environments and also promotes more support, training, and respect for family caregivers. And so there are some benefits if you're a person working without say healthcare or vision or dental. As a paid member, and that's a $15 annual fee, you will be sent a link that would allow you to purchase at a discounted group rate some of those benefits, including even like legal benefits. So it's a really good benefit opportunity in terms of that. So that's one portion of it, is kind of membership services. And we want to know what other membership benefits people would like. For instance, if we could arrange, say, a discount on car washes, or a discount on oil changes, would those be benefits that people would be interested in? Then the second part is this advocacy for change, right? And so I have experience as a lobbyist, but my experience is that when I go to talk to senators and to representatives, they want to know the number of people I represent. So the more people I can say I represent as a lobbyist, the better off, the more people will listen to me, because those are votes that I represent. But also we want people calling their senators and calling their legislators. And so part of what Caregivers in Action does is provide information on an ongoing basis about who to call, what's going on, where we need a push. And so those are kind of the two things that we're trying to do with Caregivers in Action.
Thank you, Pam. We'll just wrap up with one final question. Imelda Garcia asks, how do local agencies work with the National Down Syndrome Organization? Does anyone know the answer to that?
Yeah, I know a little bit, and I would strongly suggest that you get in touch with the ARC New Mexico, which does have a strong affiliation and connection with the National Down Syndrome Network. There's also, depending on where you live, there's, for instance, in Albuquerque, there's the Rio Grande Down Syndrome Society, so you can interact and be with them. There's a group in Silver City, there's a group in Las Cruces, there's a group in Roswell. And I don't have phone numbers or anything like that off the top of my head, but the ARC New Mexico does. They also have a special endowment that promotes, that was provided specifically for support for individuals with Down syndrome in New Mexico. And so go to the conference, talk with Veronica, she's the CEO. It's a good way to get more information.
Thank you so much, Pam Stafford. Thank you so much, Valerie Sosi, Dana Howarth, and all the attendees for today. Thank you to our interpreters too. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next on June 30th, if not before.